Hello and welcome to another episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. The show is 4 years old now, but for listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. Before we start, I'm delighted that the headline sponsor for this series of the podcast and the Material Matters Fair is Burt Frank. The company crafts beautiful lighting to order from its manufacturing base in Birmingham using traditional methods paired with the latest technology. Skilled craftsmen rely on their years of expertise and the finest quality materials to produce timeless investment pieces that will last a lifetime, going to great lengths to ensure all clients can rely on the bespoke service and a unique, beautifully engineered product. This week, I'm delighted that my guest is globally-feted designer Donna Wilson. Donna initially made a name for herself in 2003 with a series of knitted toy creatures made of lambswool, which managed to be both odd and endearing all at the same time. Since then, she's worked with the likes of SCP, John Lewis, the V&A Dundee, as well as having a solo show at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Meanwhile, her range of products has expanded, encompassing furniture and accessories, sculpture, fashion, magazines. There's also a book. In 2010, she was named Designer of the Year at Elle Decoration's British Design Awards. Most recently, she has launched a knit shop, a micro knit factory in Dundee. She describes the new production facility as my small bit to keep the tradition of knitwear and textile production in Scotland alive, so that these precious skills are not lost forever. Donna, thank you very much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Was that reasonably accurate?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Anything I should have included that I've failed to?
Loads of things, yeah.
Well, look, where are you currently? You're not giving too much away on this Zoom call.
So we're renovating our house in London. So it was a bigger job than we sort of first expected. And I ran for the hills and ended up going up to a tiny little fishing village. It was one of my grandma's favourite places near where my family are from.
Well, I was going to ask, because when we first contacted you to do this, you were in Scotland.
Yes.
But you're not in Scotland now.
No, I've just returned a couple of days ago. So I'm back in London again. We still haven't finished the house. We still can't live in it. And I'm in a friend's lovely, tranquil space at the moment.
So you're not in your studio because it's a bit noisy?
The studio's too noisy. There's lots going on in the studio all the time. It's kind of where we pack everything, and we've got the knitting machine going, and we've got a lot of people there milling around.
Yeah, I mean, can we talk about your setup a bit and what your studio looks like and maybe how you work and also where it is?
Yeah, so I've got a studio in East London, Bethnal Green. It's been there, same building. I think it's maybe like 6 or 7 years now. And before that, it was only a street away from where it is now. We have a little team of women. We do everything from there, really. It's like a kind of logistics centre, a warehouse, a craft and making space. There's the tiny little kitchen area where we sit round and have cups of tea and lunch. But it's sort of always too small. No matter what we do, it's packed, full of stuff. Which is one of the reasons I thought maybe we start the knit factory so that we can get some of the stuff out of the studio in London. But as you know, like property in London and places to work, it's just so expensive. So it's not fancy. It's not glamorous. It's just a very kind of practical working studio.
Is it tidy?
No. I mean, bits of it are. And we have a few tidy people.
Right. Are you one of them, Donna?
No, definitely not. I think they're really glad when I go away because they get to tidy my desk and things. It's a really working sort of place. It's got wool and knitting machines and lots of shelves of stock and things like that. And over the years, I do find it quite hard to throw things away. So it's a sort of accumulated bunch of stuff. But it's quite an interesting space, I suppose, because of that.
I mean, as you say, you've recently opened this new production facility in Dundee. Was that a decision you made over the pandemic?
Yes, yeah. So I'd been working with the same knit factory in the Borders for, I think, maybe about 15 years or so. That working relationship was brilliant from the start. They became friends and grew because of me as well, and bought new machines to kind of do my production. But I do remember in the beginning, they were sort of the only place I could find to do small runs of things. So where everybody was asking for like 100 or 200 or minimum order, they would say, oh, we can do 50, that's fine, or 20, that's fine. So they were really a godsend for me to start with. But as we grew and he grew, I think the relationship changed a little bit. And we started to kind of want a bit more control and more sort of transparency over the costing and the pricing and things like that. Manufacturing in the UK is hard. It's getting harder and harder. They would put the prices up and I'd be like, why is it that? We're not going to be, So I'd always be sort of questioning that and thinking, right, could we do it in a different way, maybe a more viable way? It was time for me to be a bit more in control, I think.
Yeah.
I think that is a bit of a pattern in my career because I always felt maybe I'm a bit of a control freak because I do like
ask that, funnily enough.
Were you? I like being in charge. I like being the one to blame if it goes wrong. I don't like blaming anyone else. And that's because of that. I think, right, if I can do it myself, then I can fix it or I can make sure it works. So it was a bit of that story. But also I think, we'd maybe just outgrown each other. And during the pandemic, you kind of start to think what is important, what would make things easier, what would cut out things that you're not finding so enjoyable anymore. And I was really lucky because I had a couple of people up in Dundee that I had worked with in London and moved back to Scotland. And they were really keen to start working and get a job again. And it just seemed like the right place for it. And I knew that a studio would be a lot cheaper than if we were kind of growing the one in London too. So it was partly because of that.
So that was why Dundee?
That's why Dundee. Yeah. I don't really have any family connections to Dundee, but friend connections to Dundee.
Can we talk about what it is that you do? Because you made your name with a series of knitted and stuffed characters such as Rabby Rabbit, Patch Cat, I think was an early one, Cyril, Squirrel, Fox. And over the years you've branched out. There's clothing, cushions, badges, lots of stuff for children. You could make your own Loch Ness Monster kit, and there are other things like blankets. And you've done furniture, earrings. There's a Donna Wilson calendar. And there are magazines. So there's this whole world of Wilson, essentially, and you sell all over the globe. I think I'm right in saying that your creatures first really took off in Japan. So do you see yourself as a brand?
Yes, I do now. I remember the first time someone said that to me and I found it so weird and alien. But yeah, I do now just because of how people kind of react to what I do, and when I go to trade shows and things, they feel like it's a brand. I think it's because we've got that sort of aesthetic that people kind of recognise now. Yeah, the creatures were the first thing to really take off, although I did collaborations with design product students and at their RCA and things as well. So I was always sort of between textiles and product. And for me, the creatures were sort of a real halfway between the two. I used the textiles to make them, but they were a kind of product. I saw them like an art piece. They weren't aimed at children or the mass production market.
I was going to ask whether you have a typical Donna Wilson customer. Yeah,
probably. I think in the beginning when I started, it was a lot of sort of creatives that had good jobs and money, like architects and people that worked in advertising and film and things like that tended to be customers of mine. And then I would see some cushions and things in shoots in magazines and that sort of thing. And I would be like, oh, right, they've got my cushion or whatever. But I don't know if it's maybe grown now. And we have, as you said, like we've done really well in Japan, and Asia and America is a good market for us as well. I think it's people that like that sort of homemade, handmade type aesthetic. But I think it's more than that. It's, for me, it's my, it's like a sense of colour. It's maybe a sense of humour. It's definitely, there's a slight weirdness about them that I probably have to be careful not to lose, because sometimes when I lose that, I think, oh, look, they look too generic now. I've got to bring the weirdness back. Yeah.
Is there a line with the weirdness, though?
Yeah.
They're not scary, these things. They're not intimidating at all. But they are just slightly off kilter and a bit odd. Yeah,
there's definitely a line. They're not ugly, or I don't think. Although I did give one to a friend's baby when I was doing Terry and Tina Twin, which is like a Siamese twin one, back in the early days. And she was slightly traumatized, I think, like the two-headed ones. But it is quite funny seeing people's reactions to them. Like the Americans think they're really cute, but it's not cute in a sort of kitschy pink frilly sort of way. It's I feel like there's something a little bit nostalgic about them and a little bit sad about them sometimes, or angry, or they've got emotion. I think maybe that's the key. But I don't know who our customer, I mean, it's probably still a bit the same, but I think it's probably widened out a little bit now. And yeah, as I say, we sell really well in America and Asia still. And in the UK, it's trickier for some reason. But there was a point a few years ago that I did see lots of similar sort of things. And I was like, oh God, why am I doing this still? Because there's so many things similar out there that can make them cheaper. But then I realized, no, they're not the same, actually. No, we do have something different about them. I think we have a lot of fans that still want the original thing.
Was the plan always to go global? Or did it just kind of happen organically?
It just happened organically. I think it was always to go global because I felt like I knew my market. So I'd gone round lots of shops on foot. It was sort of before websites and things anyway. So I just went into lots of places and showed people. And there's only a few shops in the UK that really would stock my work.
Right.
So I thought, if I don't go global, then I'm not really going to survive. Then at the same time, I was offered like a little exhibition in Japan. I think this was in 2005, maybe.
So really not long after you started?
No. I'd set up a little studio. I was in West Norwood in the old telephone exchange place. And I remember being there and I was sharing with someone else and it was growing. I think that was round about the time, was it, that John Lewis got in touch as well. So I was sort of trying to figure out, completely unorganized, no kind of business skills or anything, just trying to fulfill the orders that I had. And then I got asked to go to Japan, and I remember taking a big, huge suitcase over with all my creatures in it. And then my mum and auntie came and met me in Tokyo with a load of other suitcases as well, and made it a family trip. And then my distributor, who were called Trico, they set up a little exhibition in their gallery there, and they said, oh, don't get your hopes up because your work is quite expensive, so I don't think we'll get many orders. But when we'd done the show and I got back and everything, the fax machine started rolling in. Yeah. And I was getting orders for 50 of the Cyril Squirrel and 100 of the Rudy Raccoon, and it was much more than I was imagining. And then it just kept going. It just never really stopped. I had a girl calling up to see if I had any work. And I said, oh, could you come and just help me get this order done? And then it was like another 3 months. And I was like, yeah, you can carry on. And then it was another 4 years she stayed. And it just continued like that. And yeah, on the sort of run up to the 2010 thing, which was the Elle Decoration Award, I just was working like every single job under the sun, for my own business, I was doing, taking the post. I remember I was like knitting and sewing on the bus whenever I went anywhere. So I had a bag of creatures with me and I'd just be like sewing. And
did anybody stop and ask you what you were doing? That's quite intriguing.
Yeah, probably. And I remember once at the post office, the lady saying, Donna, you look really tired. But it was fun as well. I knew I was working hard, but I'm not afraid of working hard. It's just all part of it.
Spooling back to today, Donna, do you have to be careful how big you get? I mean, there is a kind of craft essence to what it is that you do. And I wonder how you go about preserving that. I mean, is it important that it's preserved?
Well, I've always struggled with that, actually. I've had times where I've thought about getting other income in through licensing. And at one point, we were doing like licensed towels and bed linen and things like that. And then it was just at the time where all the big department stores were really struggling. So it was just bad timing. But I felt like that could have been the next stage up. And then I actually had this sort of epiphany moment where I was like, actually, no, that's not where I want to go. I got kind of like carried away with the promise of the dollar signs. And then because it didn't work, then I was like, oh, okay, actually, no, why was I wanting to do that anyway? I don't want to have my stuff everywhere. But I think what I do want is it to be more comfortable and be able to pay people more. I mean, I'll never take it for granted, but sometimes it does feel like you're really sort of pushing and you need to just be able to go, oh, it's okay for a while. But maybe you never feel that. I don't know.
I was kind of quite amazed to see that you've been going
much 20 years.
20 years
now,
this year. Yeah.
Which is extraordinary. I'm wondering what changes you've seen in the worlds of, well, both craft and design during that period.
A lot of changes, I think. Well, in the beginning, I was just knitting because in art school, you do a block of knitting. And that was the thing that I really enjoyed because I was creating the actual fabric from scratch. So I didn't have any other thoughts about why I wanted to do knitting.
Is it quite therapeutic, I wonder? The sense of enjoyment you get from it?
Hand knitting is, I think.
Sure.
But I was sort of more machine knitting. Yeah. And machine knitting, it's still therapeutic in the way because you're seeing something growing from nothing, which is I quite like. And you can control the colour and the pattern and the material. But then there was this thing about how Julia Roberts was caught knitting and everyone thought, oh, you're part of that whole homegrown sort of knitting thing. And I never even thought about it like that. So I think probably unbeknownst to me, there was a bit of a knit movement back in the 2000s, early mid-2000s or so. Then there was the design part of sort of network I was part of was Torsten van Elten had a group of designers and I was really good friends with him.
Yeah. I mean, Torsten is a kind of design consultant and retailer, right?
Yeah. And he worked with Ed Carpenter and Ed and Andre from...
Really Good and Proper.
Yeah. And there was Richard Shedd and Sam Johnson. There was a few people that were doing things like they were sort of taking... How would I describe it? I hate the word quirky, but there was a sort of sense of humour to it all, I suppose. I sort of fitted on the edge of that, although I wasn't part of his group, but I was sort of on the side, trying to tag along with him. Because I remember I did this big rug that looked like a doily and it was cut out of felt. That was when I was at the RCA. So taking things out of scale and proportion and blowing them up massive. And I remember that was a really good one for Elle Decoration, used that on their cover and things like that. So there was lots of that sort of playfulness, I suppose is the thing I'm looking for. Then that went really out of fashion and it got more serious and probably more sort of art-led. And maybe that's the problem, was like being part of everything.
I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is there has been a renewed interest in repair over the last few years. I mean, you're quite big on it on your website and your YouTube channel. You've introduced repair kits. Repair is important to you.
Definitely. And I mean, I'm from a farming family, so I guess that has quite a lot to do with why I do what I do, because my dad's always had his own business and I've always seen that. And also my grandma was a great influence on me and she was always she was so frugal and always into fixing things. She'd never buy anything. She'd always just keep everything. Again, relating back to how the studio looks like it does, thinking that things are going to come in handy. And I think we should all be like that really to an extent, because this throwaway culture feels so wrong. The repair thing is definitely something that I've always done. And, you know, even before it got sort of trendy, we were fixing old creatures and we had this sort of creature hospital. And we don't really shout about it, but we probably should.
Well, there are brands that do. Lots of jeans manufacturers make a real song and dance.
Yeah.
Are your creature repairs for free or do you charge?
We did start to do them for free and then we realised actually we can't really afford to do that because it's obviously someone's time and it does take time and you have to knit extra little bits and match colours and things like that. So we do charge for it now, but I think it's not too much, like £30 or something like that.
People can do it themselves. This is the idea of their repair kits.
The repair kits, yeah, they're 15, yeah, and you can do it yourself. And the nice thing about it now is that you can do visible repairs and that's quite acceptable and can even enhance what you've got. So yeah, I love all that. I love that these things that you buy and they're not cheap, so you do want to keep them forever or keep them for a long time. And I wouldn't feel right about producing things that I just feel like we shouldn't produce stuff that will just land in landfill and won't rot away, or that we're going to be leaving all this stuff behind. So that's part of the reason that I like working with the wool, and we're working on sort of wool stuffing as well, but at the moment we're using sort of recycled polyester bottles, which isn't, I don't know how I feel like about that, but at least it's recycling waste, you know. But yeah, I think that we've got a responsibility to not leave loads of crap behind us.
Hope you're enjoying the episode. Just to let you know, the Material Matters Fair with headline sponsor lighting specialist Bert Frank is returning to the Barge House from the 20th to the 23rd of September. Once again, each of the 5 floors will be doing something slightly different, but all will be related to materials. There'll also be a talks programme, some returning exhibitors, so the recycled aluminium giant Hydro will be there, as will the Wood Awards, Solid Wool, Hagen Hinderdal, Mixed Metals and Blake Joshua, for example. And there'll also be some exciting new names, such as the Tyre Collective, Biomatters, Nova Vita Design, Anna Bridgewater, also known as Abalon, Plank, Goldfinger, The Wicker Story, Yarn Newman, and Regular Concrete, with others to follow. There will also be a special installation from Milan-based platform Isola. If you're interested in taking part, do drop me a line at hello@materialmatters.design. That's hello@materialmatters.design.
You have this huge following. You have like 100,000 followers on Instagram, for instance. But there's also something cult-like about what you do too, isn't there? Did Donna Wilson customers send images of their buys to each other and stuff? I mean, is there a community beyond you, or is it all centered around you, I wonder?
I don't really know the answer to that. There's a lot of people posting things, including our hashtag in it, and so that we can see them. But I don't know if it goes on behind my back or not.
Did you know that somebody's written a poem about you?
No, I did not know that, no.
Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. You ready?
I'm going to blush.
I'll just clear my throat. Donna Wilson, you make me smile. You're the best knitting designer I've seen in a long while. The humour you put into all your designs makes each one seem like a whimsical find. I just love your kooky bearded man and Peeping Tom. I think he was there back when it began. Your blah blah rug just makes me grin. And now there's Grace. She's the yin to Meg's yin. In addition, there's another bit. No matter how I try, I just can't learn to knit. So there you go. That's Joanna Frankham, I believe.
Oh my God.
You've never come across that before.
Thank you, Joanna. That's...
Beautifully read too, I think. You know.
Yeah, I didn't know that existed. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Where did you find that?
Well, it's called the internet. What I do is I look things up. Google, it's an amazing thing.
I haven't Googled myself in a while.
Well, I Google myself the whole time. It's terrible. Very narcissistic. As you get bigger and people write more poems about you, and you have this production facility and things like that, presumably you have to delegate more.
Yes.
And do you find that difficult?
Yes. Not so much as I did, but as I sort of mentioned earlier on, I've been away in Scotland for a bit and I really had to delegate then. And recently I have been thinking that as well, it let people be able to do their jobs. What I found having this sort of 6 months away from it was I was able to think more. And there's that thing where people say about creatives need time to do nothing. I never let myself have that time to do nothing because I feel too guilty. I've got this sort of, I've got to be working and blah, blah, blah. You know, I've got 2 kids, so I felt like the time in Scotland was really for them. And it was great because I actually got lots of headspace that I didn't think was there before. And I've been able to sort of stand back from it a little bit. And I think that's really healthy for me. And I'm determined not to kind of go back so much into fixing the printer or, you know, whatever I do when I'm in the studio.
I mean, is it easy when you're not in Scotland to find time to design?
No, it's not easy. But I'm hoping that once we've got our house, I can have a studio there and spread out and have my quiet space there. I think London is such a busy place in so many ways, not just like people, but just there's pressures on you, I think, that when I was out of it, I forgot really existed, you know, that just the sort of rat race thing, horrible term, but, you know, just the sort of constant pushing yourself and comparing yourself. And I suppose with social media, it's quite hard to get away from that as well, because you see all these people doing really well and doing fun things and you're like, oh my God, I've got to keep up with it. So
they're only showing you the best bits. Though,
exactly.
Right?
And so I've had to switch that off a bit. But yeah, I'm hoping to be able to be a bit more disciplined with myself. But I've got a brilliant team, so they're quite capable of doing it. And I've seen for the last 6 months that nothing's fallen apart. So
well, there's a relief. Where do the ideas, particularly the creatures, I guess, I mean, where do they emerge from?
Well, I guess in the very beginning, and I'm talking about when I was at art school at the RCA, I had an amazing tutor. You've had her on the show, actually, Freddie Robbins.
Freddie Robbins, yeah.
And she was just so inspiring. So I was making these little dolls in between first year and second year and selling them to little sort of independent design stores. And she looked at them and she's like, brilliant, you've done that. How can you make them a bit weirder? How can you challenge yourself? How can you push yourself? So that's where the odd creatures came from. And I was looking at how kids draw and how free they are, and there's no preconceptions, and you can give a cat 5 legs if you want to. And I loved that kind of naivety, and I just found it really fun and played with that. And then sort of Cyril Squirrel Fox was born. They all just sort of developed from each other, I suppose, and still do. So it's not like I'm starting from scratch every time. I'm kind of going from one to the next one. And for a while, it was like quite led by what sold well, you know, in different countries, and some countries like the animal ones and some like the weirder ones. And then I think was in danger of becoming a bit too generic maybe. So I've started to go back to the weirder ones again.
And what about process, Donna?
Yeah.
Do you draw, for instance?
Yeah,
Is there
I draw.
a sketchbook full of different animals?
Yeah, I draw them, but they're just line draw. They're not beautiful drawings that you could frame. They're just like line drawing sketches. And then I'd say then it would be working out what kind of colours or patterns are going to be on the body, and then knitting that up. And then we wash it, felt it, and then I would draw then straight onto the fabric with like a wax pen. And then I'd used to sew it myself, but I do have a seamstress now, so I get Lo to sew them up. And then she would stuff them, and then I'd sort of say, where do you want the eyes and what do the eyes look like? Because the eyes and the face are sort of the most important part of the creature and give it its character. And that's kind of it. It goes back. Sometimes they don't look right. Sometimes Lottie now, my design assistant, can kind of get what I like. So she does some of the designs now too. But usually starts from an idea that I've had or a theme or something like that. So it's taken a long time to kind of get to the point where I can pass stuff on. But yeah, I feel like we've got a good bunch of people now, so it's working.
But it sounds like the finished article or the finished creature can look quite different from your initial line drawing. Would that be true?
Not really. No, I'll do like loads of line drawings and I'll pick one, and then it can be quite similar, really. Yeah, the expression of the face and things, it's all down to like the way that I draw. So Lo can translate that into stitching, just exactly the same, into embroidery. Do
the creatures, or anything you design really, because I keep concentrating on the creatures, but you design lots of things, obviously. But are they affected by mood? Can you say, oh, that was a bit cross that day, therefore this creature looks like this?
Maybe not. There are ones that are like really angry creatures and really sad and happy, but I don't think it's affected by my mood, because I tend to be fairly even most of the time when I'm at work. It's just at home I get really angry. I don't know. I'd have to have a look to see what, because I have had tougher times. But no, I think I managed to hold the work part together. Okay.
Right. Shall we talk about your background?
Yeah.
Because you've alluded to some of it already. You grew up on a farm, northeast Scotland, Aberdeenshire. Mm-hmm. Your parents, or your father at least, was a farmer. Was there art and making in the Wilson household?
No. I was the only one that I just couldn't stop drawing, like from as soon as I could hold a pencil. And I was looking recently at some of the drawings my mum showed me, and she still had them when I was 2 or something, or 3. So no, we didn't have any making or drawing or any appreciation of artists or art, except for my grandma. She was an amateur artist. She did sort of educate me a little bit, and she had a few calendars and things of different artists, but I wouldn't say there was nothing modern there. It was sort of more traditional ones. And her work was quite traditional too. But she was a very inspiring woman and a really good teacher and very patient. So there was definitely that. And I definitely felt that it was nurtured and it was encouraged. But my mum and dad, I think, were slightly disappointed that I wasn't a boy to carry on the farm. And then even more disappointed when they had my sister, because My dad's from like a string of generations of farmers. Yeah.
On the same farm or?
Yeah, on the same farm. But then my dad sort of bought other farms. So he's sort of grown it.
And is he still farming now?
He is, yeah. Yeah, he's still farming. They did get the son 18 years after me.
Okay.
So
God,
my brother
kept
Robert.
Trying.
They did. They had a gap. And then when I was at art school, my mum had my brother Robert. And luckily Robert is super interested and amazing at the farm and wants to do his own thing with it, which is brilliant. Yeah.
There's never any question of you or your sister taking over the farm?
I think it's that old-fashioned traditional thing that they don't think women can do it. And it's changing now slightly, but it's still sort of there. So it wasn't really encouraged, even though I was quite into it and I loved the animal side of it, but I wasn't so much into the tractor side of it. It wasn't really sort of encouraged that much. When I was sort of into drawing and art, we were sort of sent up to my grandma quite a lot, and she would always have us drawing and painting and making things out of Fimo and things like that. So she was the one that really, she must have seen something in me and my sister, and she got our artwork framed, even though it wasn't very good. But I do remember getting £50 for selling one of my paintings when I was really young, actually. So it was the first time I was like, God, you can actually make money from selling your work, which was a really good lesson. Yeah, so that was where the art interest, I suppose, came from. But I just remember always doodling all the time on the phone, or if I was just eating dinner, I'd sit there with a pen scribbling.
What were you like at school, Donna?
I was quite shy at school. Primary school was fine. As soon as the teacher realised I was good at art, that was my label. So I was like, oh, you do the artwork, you do anything that's got art in it, you do it. And I loved that because it gave me a sort of purpose and gave me confidence in something. And then secondary school, I got split up from all my primary school friends. So I was sort of on my own. And I didn't ever really take to secondary school. I mean, it was fine, but it just wasn't really my thing. And I was good at art, but that was sort of it. I was good at anything. So I was craft and design and graphic communications and art, but English and maths, I just sort of struggled by, and geography and things. So it was sort of inevitable that I would go to art school afterwards. And my art teacher at school, her daughter had already gone the year before me, so to Gray's School of Art in Aberdeen.
So when you went to Gray's, what did your work look like by the time you'd graduated? What kinds of things were you making and designing?
It was all my theme was weather.
Probably a reason for that, where you were brought up. Were they a bit grey?
It was all a bit grey, and
I should be careful what I say because it's beautiful up there.
Yeah.
I hasten to add. My family came from the Orkneys, so
really? Okay.
So yeah. So I'm very fond of it.
Yeah, it was grey and green and brown, let's say, and that's when I discovered felting as well. I was a hard worker at Gray's and I really enjoyed it, and that was the first time I'd really felt that I'd found my people when I went to art school. The first day I was there, I was like, this is it. I hated secondary school, but this is where I'm meant to be. I did have a really good time at Gray's, and I had a couple of tutors that were sort of visiting lecturers, and one was called Charlie Hackett, who'd come up from Glasgow. And I remember him looking at my work going, Donna, this is great, but you need to put... he stuck a bright blue plastic bag on my grey and brown, and he's like, look at that, let's just mix it all pink. And I just couldn't understand. I was like, but I'm trying to be all earthy and mossy. And then it clicked and I was like, I get that now, the contrast. I didn't really get it till afterwards. And when I moved to London, I really got it because I was like, oh, okay, you don't want everything all the same. You need to have something that sets off the other thing and makes it pop. It was a good lesson. So yeah, my work wasn't anything, there was no creatures, there was no kind of personality there. It was quite earthy and natural, and natural dyes and that sort of natural colour.
I think you did a 3-month exchange, didn't you, in Maastricht?
Oh yeah, I did.
That had quite a profound impact.
Yeah, that did have a really big impact on me because I remember flying over and I didn't know anyone, and I was like, what am I doing? I don't know any Dutch at all, and I'm landing in this country in a minute, and how am I even going to find the art school? And I found the art school eventually and said something in Dutch, and they just talked back in English, and they did all the lessons in English for me. I met all these amazing people, and they were so different from the people in Aberdeen, actually. The European, very open and free, and much more No, not much more creative, but just in a different way. And it was more kind of a fine art course than a design course, which was more about your thinking and personal experiences and how to get that into your work. So that was really interesting too. And I remember coming back to Gray's and I was wanting to be a fine artist. And they said, no, you can't do that. That's not this course. So I had to kind of change it back into design, which, design's for.
When you graduated, you came to London and you worked at a knitwear company, I think, for a short period of time. Were you always going to come down to the capital?
No, I wasn't.
Of England, because obviously it's not the capital of Scotland, I hasten to add. Were you always going to come down to London, should I just say?
No, I wasn't. That wasn't really in the plan, but I couldn't find a job. And I just knew that I wanted to have a job in textiles. But my world was pretty small, apart from the fact that I went to Holland. But my world at that point was Aberdeen or maybe Edinburgh. Going to London was a major deal. But I felt quite confident, I think, after I'd left or when I'd finished. And I just applied to hundreds of different textile jobs that I could find. And I sent my CV off and trudged around. It was mostly, textile companies that sell their work to designers. You get a kind of commission and you sell the design rather than the pattern.
Right. Okay. Right.
So that was the kind of companies that I could find that were textile led. And then my tutor at the time said, I've got a friend in London, maybe I'll organise an interview for you. So that's when I ended up working it was called CXD. It was a cashmere knitwear company. That was working in an office. And that was a huge change because from an art school, then to London, and then in an office where people kind of wear smart clothes and and it was just off Regent Street. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like there's so many people and I just feel like a number and it's so anonymous. And for a long, long time, I actually really liked that anonymity of London. But yeah, there's good parts and bad parts, I suppose. I had a really good boss again, and I was really lucky. But then I realised that I just wasn't being creative enough. And I really wanted to do my own thing and be my own boss, I think, was the main thing. Be in charge of my own work and stuff. So
that's quite interesting. Where do you think that comes from? This need to be in control? I
think it is maybe seeing my dad being like that, or my family, and not really liking being told what to do.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. I think probably those two things.
Subsequent to that, you went to the Royal College of Art and you failed on your first attempt to get in. So you must have been pretty determined. You really wanted to go there, obviously.
Oh, it was so embarrassing because it was when I was in Gray's School of Art. So my tutor, Charlie, was like, you've got to go for it. And I had my best friend went to St. Martin's and she got in. I chose the Royal College of Art. And it was quite old school at that point. There was James Park, I think. And it was probably one of his last years and he was just so strict. I remember my only sort of designer that I knew was Issey Miyake. And they kept saying, so what designer do you like? And I said, Issey Miyake. And they said, where would you like to end up after the Royal College? And I said, Issey Miyake. And then every question I was answering Issey Miyake for because I didn't know what else to say. And no surprise, I didn't get in. So the second time I'd done a year at the knitwear company, and then I'd done a year for a small designer called Michelle Wilde, helping her with weaving and seeing how she had set up her independent design studio, and it was in Richmond, and I really liked that kind of lifestyle. And I was going out with an artist at the time, and I was just much more involved in London. I could see that the sort of earthy felted scraps were not going to cut it. And so I got my own knitting machine and I did some really bright colours and patterns and making weird objects and things. And I remember my portfolio was totally different as well. And I did this big map with paper and folded it all up. And then I made a portfolio case out of wallpaper with a big pink line, white wallpaper, a big pink line around it. And so it really stood out compared to all the black portfolio cases you get. And I remember Freddie saying, oh, I really liked your portfolio case. The interview was just totally different. And I think I was just much more sort of aware of what was around me, much more ready for it. And I wasn't pushed into it through someone else. I just really wanted to be there. So that was a huge difference as well. And I really knew what I wanted to do, that I wanted to have my own business after.
what I find intriguing is, I mean, you've talked about Freddie and making these creatures to begin with, but they were something of a sideline, weren't they? I mean, they started as Donna dolls and a way of making money to support your masters.
Yeah.
So where did you see yourself going at that stage?
I didn't really know, to be honest. I did a collaboration with Carmel McElroy, who was the same year as me, but she was in design products. So the dolls were a sideline, and I'd done some ceramics that I'd wrapped up in wool and things as well for my final show. But the main part, I guess, or maybe the part that we thought was going to make our fortune, was this glove rug that I'd got Johnson's of Elgin to sponsor us 3,500 glove fingers, not the whole glove, just the fingers. Carmel knew Abe Rogers because he was a tutor of hers.
Okay. Of the Lord Rogers clan of architects. Yeah,
well, Abe's son. So he lent us his amazing house. And we had this space where we set 3,500. Oh no, before that we had to stuff all of these fingers with like cubes of foam. And then we went to Abe's house and we set them in polyurethane rubber. But you had to wait till the rubber had sort of cured by about 1.5 seconds or something. Because if you put it in too early, it would soak right up. But if you put it in too late, then it wouldn't stick. So it was like a precision thing. We had rows and rows. So we made this like beautiful rug. It was just a carpet of glove fingers. And it was really tactile and it was really stunning and effective, because multiples of everything is always really effective. We thought this was going to be the next Heels or Habitat, or I think Purvis and Purvis were around then, and we went there. Yeah. We went to all these places. We went to Christopher Farr and went to all these places with it afterwards, but nobody knew how to interpret it and make it into like a viable product. It was so disappointing. We were gutted. We're like, this is going to be our thing. But in the meantime, you know, that was when we just left RCA. But in the meantime, I'd always had my creatures going at the same time, and I've always got like lots of fingers in different pies just in case one thing doesn't work out.
Was there a point where you realised that the creatures was going to be the main thing?
Yeah, I think it was after that. So I'd done a show with Designers Block, and they were amazing group, and that was where my sort of community, as I mentioned before about Torsen and everything, that's where that all came from. Designers Block was brilliant, and we had the first one was, or maybe it's the second one I did. It was in the Farmaloos building in Farringdon.
Okay, should probably explain, just for listeners who may not know about Designers Block. It was a big kind of, it was like a fair for emerging designers where they, Piers and Rory, Roberts and Dodd would take a disused building and then invite loads of interesting designers to fill it, fundamentally.
Yeah, and they kept it sort of affordable for designers. You had to pay something, but it wasn't sort of out of the question like a lot of trade shows were and still are. And and there was just this amazing energy because of this disused building thing, I think, as well. It was just so kind of fun. And they had the big party and invited people to come and see it and everything. And I had a small dark room, I remember, with Carmel and with a few other designers. I had a wall of these creatures, and they were all just stuck to the wall on this sort of pinboard thing. And I remember this man coming up, and I was just blagging it and just sort of going, and he's like, what are they called? And I was making up names off the top of my head. And this is Ed Redhead, and this is this and this and this. And he said, all right, I'll take them all, please. And I was like, what? and he gave me his card, and it was Murray Moss from...
Oh, wow. From New York. Yeah.
New York. And I didn't really know who he was, actually, but my friend Carmel was like, oh my God, he's so really, influential. And so he had the creatures sort of 2 or 3 seasons up for holiday seasons. That was a big learning curve, because I suddenly got back from that show and I was like, oh my God, I can't remember who's bought these, who's ordered them, who's paid me, who hasn't paid me. It was a big mess. But I kind of managed and worked it all out. That was probably a moment for me of like, oh God, people really like these, and people like that really like them, so it must mean something.
I mean, one of your, in some ways, I think most surprising supporters in some regards has been Sheridan Coakley, contemporary furniture retailer and manufacturer SCP, known over the years for supporting the likes of Matthew Hilton and Jasper Morrison early in their career. His championing of you seemed to indicate a shift in that company, I always think. And as well as creatures, you've done furniture and sculptures from the abstract assembly range. How important has SCP been to your development, I wonder?
Yeah, I would say extremely important, because having someone like Sheridan sort of getting behind me and challenging and supporting what I do, it's been a really good confidence boost. And it's been really good fun working together as well. And yeah, I think before me, hadn't worked with many other women. And I think that that had opened that up for other people too. And yeah, I think for what I did, it was a time where people started to take me a bit more seriously and think, oh, okay. It was all about that sort of 2009-10 sort of time when I started working with Sheridan. And working on pieces of furniture was brilliant too, because before that I'd only sort of done soft furnishing like cushions and things.
So is that you wanting to work on furniture or him pushing you to create furniture pieces?
I think he asked me first, yeah, because I didn't think I was capable of doing that. And then we did the Motley, which was a really good collaboration between the two of us, because it was the knitted Chesterfield sort of, well, buttoned ottoman, and it was in rainbow colours. So we knitted all the fabric for it, and then Coakley & Cox made it up into the piece. And I worked with them on the comfort and the feel of it and the materials, but I kind of had this idea of what I wanted it to look like. It was really good fun and good for my other work too, because it did sort of push me on a bit. Because I'd always wanted to be in that design world in a way through working with Carmel before and, going to Milan Furniture Fair and things like that. And I felt like this is such a exciting place to be. So yeah, it made that part happen, which was brilliant. And we're still good friends. We're trying to work together again, maybe quite soon. But yeah, it sort of goes in waves depending on how busy we both are and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's a similar question with John Lewis, really. When you're doing things like the childwear collection that you did with John Lewis, did they come to you with that? Did you go to them? How did that relationship work?
They came to me. So I remember getting asked to go in, and they had all their mood board was photos of my work. So it was kind of a no-brainer, because I was like, well, you've already done it, sort of thing.
I was going to say, they definitely wanted you to work with them.
Yeah. And I had the same with Mamas and Papas.
Right.
But I think maybe lessons learned, I should have maybe pushed a bit harder with them. And I think part of my problem is like lack of confidence in myself. So I should have gone, well, actually, what I want to do is this. But I was more like, oh my God, wow, they've got the whole thing designed and it's exactly what's out there already as in terms of my work, but in, kids' clothing. So in hindsight, maybe I should have tried to lead it a little bit more, but I kind of let it just happen the way they wanted it to. And then it was good, but it was, I feel like I could have pushed it more, and I could have tried for more sort of representation on the website or in their stores and things like that. But just having that confidence to do that, I suppose, in hindsight.
Donna, our time is nearly up. Thank you very much for everything.
Oh no, are we going to finish on that note?
No, not yet. Because I tend to finish.
Okay.
Because I'm keen to know about your I'm keen to know about your plans for the future. What we can expect from you.
Plans for the future. Well, as I've mentioned, it's my 20th anniversary. So at the moment, we're just working out a kind of exhibition plan. We're going to try and do something at Design Week in September, which we haven't done for a long time, but we've got a space now. We're going to try and get together all of the old creatures that we've ever made. So a bit of a retrospective, but also I'm hoping to work on some new furniture pieces in the abstract assembly thing. I'd like to continue working with that, because that's something that I feel like it's only at the beginning of its development.
Right.
And there's a lot more I want to do with it.
Since you're talking about it, let's just spend a moment on the abstract assembly series. What is it for the listeners who might not have seen it?
It's a group of furniture, chairs at the moment, and mirrors and sculpture, but they're wooden, colourful, and they're usually made out of Douglas fir and bits of found wood. And it's kind of what it says, abstract.
Does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Basically, that's, shut up, Grant. I don't want to talk about this. Let's move on.
I don't mind talking about it. But I think it's something that I wanted to do to get a little bit of that creativity back. And it was just before lockdown. And I kind of feel like it started and then it stopped. And I want to kind of pick it up again, because I feel like there could be more mileage in doing more and seeing where it takes me. But I don't really know where it's going to take me, but I'm just enjoying making them and doing them. So
very good. So this 20th anniversary celebration will have all the old creatures,
yep,
new work, including the Abstract Assembly series.
Yes.
And people will be able to come and see it in September.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Well, that's wonderful. Look forward to September.
Great. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time, Donna. I really enjoyed that.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.
To find out more about Donna, go to donnawilson.com. My thanks go to the series and headline sponsor, the brilliant lighting specialist Bert Frank. You can find out more about them at bertfrank.co.uk. As ever, there are images from the interviews on my Instagram page, materialmatters.design. You can find all the podcasts that I've done, sign up to our newsletter, and lots of other stuff at materialmatters.design. Finally, this is really important too. If you've enjoyed listening and want to see this podcast flourish, then please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this from. And it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £2.50 a month, you can receive exclusive posts, blogs and thoughts from yours truly, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message, the importance of materials, skill, craft and design to a whole new audience. Thanks very much for listening.